All right, so let's talk about this rescheduling of cannabis. So first of all, I know how everybody's like, as soon as something hits the internet, like everybody's an expert. So as an FYI, I did a TED talk years ago about replacing opioids with cannabis. I'll repost it everywhere. I've been on magazine covers. Like this is something that like I've been a big part of for a long time. One of the big things that we talk about specifically with cannabis real quick is the problem we get into is people say, well, you can't dose it. Like, if you smoke a joint, you get 200 milligrams and, you can't, dose that out and gummies, sometimes you get some, sometimes you don't. It's like, we can't dose it. Yes, we can. I talked about this in my TED talk, one of the major points. This is a sublingual strip. We've had this technology for a while. I've been using it in my practice for a long time for pain and things like that. So open it up inside, there's a sublingual strip. The sublingual strip will dissolve into your tongue, goes into your bloodstream. You don't have to worry about swallowing stuff, inhaling stuff. There's no smoke or anything else that's safe for your lungs. When my son had surgery to remove a plate and 6 screws out of his arm and cut off a big piece of chunk of skin where he had a big scar, when he came home, all I gave him were pieces of this strip. However, we were able to dose it, so he never had any psychological function, so he never got high, but he had no pain. You can block pain long before you get high. And here's the cool thing. When you talk about anxiety and stuff like that, you can block and reduce anxiety with cannabis as well. The problem is that for a lot of people are like, oh, when I smoke weed, I get really paranoid and like it causes more anxiety. Yeah, so you can block, not for everybody, everybody's dosage level is obviously different, but let's say, 5 milligrams blocks anxiety, 25 milligrams brings on paranoia. The problem is that when you smoke a joint, you get 200 milligrams. So dose function is extremely important for everything. The amount of water you drink, the amount of CoQ10 you take, the amount of opioids you take, all those things. We've used these strips to replace opioids dozens and dozens and dozens of times with our patients, and it's been phenomenal each time. So the idea that we can't, one, use these to reduce and eliminate pain without getting people high is silly. We do it all the time. The idea that you can't replace opioids, you can. Now, this isn't going to work for, knocking people out for surgery, but when they come home, this is probably the best option we have. It's safer in your kidneys and everything else than Tylenol, Advil, everything else. So these strips are amazing. They've worked really, really well. And now that we have legal function to research, we're going to start using these. We have some connections with different cancer research groups. And so we're going to start moving these through. I've got a couple of people who know RFK, so hopefully we'll get there. If you guys know RFK, or if you guys know how to, blow these videos up so that they can see them, that'd be beneficial. Now, here's the deal that's actually going to be beneficial for the rescheduling. Because of the rescheduling, now we can do research, but here's the biggest piece. There's a bunch of tax function that's changed. And so a lot of these cannabis grows and cannabis companies were dealing with anywhere from 50 to 80% functional tax rate because they couldn't write anything off because of the Schedule 1. However, now that we've changed it, now their tax brackets are going to go down to 20 to 40%, depending on the state. Now, all of a sudden, we can reduce the cost of the cannabis. And guess what? Now they can compete with black market stuff. Now they can actually get underneath price-wise black market stuff. So all this weird stuff that we're worried about, having all sorts of weird chemicals and all sorts of bad stuff on, we don't have to worry about anymore because now our clean grows that everybody knows of, and you put your name on it, and people recognize that if there's something that's bad in it, it's going to blow back on that company because so they're just going to make sure it's safe and clean, which is not very difficult. Now those guys can come out and they can compete with, Joe Blow down the street who brought in a bunch of stuff from Mexico illegally. So the safety of cannabis is going to go through the roof. The price is going to come down, and the function and affordability for the grows is going to go through the roof. So major positive changes for everybody. And this is one of those big, big things that's been super beneficial to a lot of people. So these are some of the things that are coming out. This is a really, really, really big deal. Now, I know that Dr. Amen has been going around and telling everybody that cannabis will destroy your brain. The problem with what he's doing is that he's not really lying to you, but he is. What he did was he took a subgroup of people who have significant, naturally low dopamine production, and cannabis increases the release of dopamine. And so what ends up happening is it's highly therapeutic to these people who have depression, schizophrenia, all these things. So they use cannabis. They go, oh my gosh, I finally feel normal, because it increases the release of dopamine, so it goes back to normal levels. But here's the issue. If they don't produce enough, what ends up happening is that their small stores get depleted too much, and that creates a problem. So Cannabis isn't going to rot your brain unless you have specific already, genetically or already functioning low dopamine function. The dopamine helps increase what's called cerebral blood flow. The increase of cerebral blood flow puts oxygen to the brain. If we have decreased cerebral blood flow, like we have in depression and all these things, it's already low. We already have reduced cerebral blood flow. Dr. Amen knows this. This is why when he did his research, he only used people that he already knew had lower cerebral blood flow, so that he could make this big statement that cannabis was the cause when he knew cannabis was not the cause of the lowered cerebral blood flow. So a lot of these guys who are coming out and being like, oh, it's terrible for you, are actively trying to deceive you into not liking cannabis. Now, I don't know why he decided to do this. I don't know if he's getting, funding from alcohol groups, or if he's getting funding from anti-cannabis groups or pharma. I have no idea. But what he's going around telling people is factually accurate, that yes, cannabis made the problem worse. But what he's telling you is that if you smoke cannabis, this is going to happen to you. That's a lie, and he knows it. So if you guys are worried about some of this stuff, get real, actual functional research. Share this with people. Cannabis is a phenomenal natural way of reducing pain, reducing anxiety, resetting the system. It is extremely safer than alcohol. So, if you're going to compare this to, something, especially if you're going to look at it from a recreational standpoint, there is no recreational function, alcohol, any other drug, that is nearly as safe for you as cannabis. Cannabis, we see all these alcohol overdoses that leads to death. There's a whole bunch of reasons for that. The biggest one is that alcohol shuts off the pons in the brainstem. The pons is the reason why you breathe while you're asleep. It controls what's called autonomic respiration. Now, if you shut that off, you stop breathing and you die. There are no receptors for cannabis in the pons, which is why people smoke a whole bunch and they never die. So from a overdose to death issue, not a thing with cannabis. We all know that there's no violence, there's no, everything else is significantly better from a recreational standpoint for cannabis over alcohol, which is one of the reasons that alcohol sales are down so much, and why the alcohol industry is freaking out, and why they paid Dan Patrick from Texas so much money to ban all this stuff in Texas. Now it's coming out. Now I understand. Pay off the politicians and they make laws change. That's what happened. That's why all this big stuff happened in Texas, which is also why when everybody else looked at it, they're like, no, this is a giant industry. It's helping a lot of people. Just because Dan Patrick got paid off doesn't mean that they're going to allow the bills to go through, which is why it never actually got passed. So that's kind of where we're at. We'll post some more stuff. I'm going to put my TED Talk back up. You guys share that, look at that. But, this is what Trump did yesterday is a massive step forward in actually getting people healthy and actually giving us an option besides opioids. All the addiction and death that is tied directly to opioids. We now have a different option. So we can go through research function. We can actually start getting these things into research hands. We can start getting finance for research, and we can start pushing back against the opioid epidemic and all the other issues we're seeing. We now have a more natural option that will actually help, opposed to the opioids and some of the benzos for anxiety and stuff like that. So if you guys have any questions, hit us up, share this around. We're going to have a lot of really big fun things in the near future, really helping people with cannabis. You guys have a fantastic day. Thanks for your time.